Welcome to the AEW Match Guide podcast, where we deep dive into the best matches in AEW history. Brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network and your host, Sam Brown. Yes, hello and welcome to the AEW Match Guide podcast. I'm your host, Sam Brown. Thank you for joining me. Every week, alongside a special guest, I take an in-depth look at one of the best matches in AEW history, taken from the definitive AEW Match Guide, as ranked by over 30 wrestling commentators from around the internet wrestling community. If you enjoy the show today, you can subscribe and rate it on your podcast app of choice, and make sure you check out all of the other great shows on the Social Suplex Podcast Network that cover all aspects of the world of pro wrestling. My guest for today is a podcaster, writer, and born contrarian, Rey Cash from the Outsider's Edge on the Chairshot radio network. And we're looking at Proud and Powerful versus Best Friends in the parking lot fight from Dynamite on the 16th of February, 2020. How are you going today, Ray?
Good, man. You're good at that.
Thank you very much. I've been rattling it off for the last 10 weeks or so. So it's starting to get ingrained. Eventually I won't have to read it, hopefully.
You're more professional than I've ever been, and I've done this 10 years. So good on you.
Oh, well, good to hear. Now, Ray, I want to get straight into it because you're never one to mince words. And I think for people who do follow your work on the Chairshot Radio Network as a podcaster, writer, or follow you on social media, just know you from around the traps, they might be wondering, why have I got Ray onto an AEW podcast? Because you're someone who isn't afraid to really lay the boot into AEW at different points. Yep. And you're someone who has at times been highly critical of AEW. But I actually know a different side of you from talking to you and going back and forth with you and getting stuck into you sometimes. You're actually someone who does appreciate the company a lot and has a really long history, more than a lot of us, with the people who formed this company and who created this company and the scene that it came out of. So before we get stuck into the match, Ray, what's your history with AEW and the guys that have made this company?
So I am a fan of AEW. It may not come off that way a lot, but I am. But I got into AEW originally through New Japan. I used to be what people say I am, a WWE shield. I didn't watch anything else. I didn't even acknowledge that other companies existed other than maybe TNA and stuff like that. If it wasn't a WWE, it didn't matter. And then the Wrestle Kingdom that was put on pay-per-view, I believe that was when Shinsuke fought
Kota Ibushi. WrestleMania, yes. Wrestle Kingdom 9, I think it was.
My man, that's it. That's the one. And it was Okada versus Tanahashi, I think, the first time.
Yep.
And opened my eyes. I was like, what have I been missing? Why have I not been watching this? And so I kept up with New Japan ever since then. And of course, I started watching wrestling right before the Attitude Era started. So growing up as a kid, of course, I'm a huge NWO fan, which led me to enjoying Bullet Club. And so I always enjoyed, we make a joke on our show that we give all deference to the Tongans because Tongans and Samoans are I give all deference to them in wrestling parlance.
Look, we do on this show as well. I don't want no smoke with the Tongans or Samoans.
No smoke whatsoever. Whatever you tell me to do, I will do happily. But that's when I first learned of Kenny and the Bucks. You had heard of the Bucks over the years. But that's when I really got a chance to really give them a chance. I have a love-hate situation with the Bucks, but in terms of Kenny, Cody, and Hangman, I had been big fans of from the very beginning. Loved everything they did. Was gonna go to the Supercard where Cody and Kenny fought. I had tickets for all that. I just didn't end up going. I ended up selling them. But yeah, so big fan of that situation. And being the Elite, didn't miss episode, transitions in AEW. And of course, you have excitement for another wrestling company of scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, as I said, you're someone who hasn't been afraid to mince words. But I hope that as people will be able to see as we dig into this match, it actually comes from a place of passion for you. You want excellence from this company. And so you hold them to a high standard.
Yeah, man. I this may sound crazy, but I hold people to what they say. And so that it bothers me when I see the people who are in charge of this company, Tony Khan and all the EVPs and whatnot, and they say these magnanimous things first and foremost, they don't have to say anything for us to like them. They're an alternative. The wrestling product is fantastic. You don't have to big it up and like make up stuff to make us watch. We care already. But the things, so many things have been said over the years that have turned out to be untrue or just like peppering extra things to make it sound better. And like that bothers me as a fan because I don't need that. I just want you to be real with me. But that's a completely separate issue I have from the product. I really can't criticize the product other than like some nitpicks. But the product's fantastic. The product largely is better than WWE's product on a regular basis.
Look, I don't want to. It'd be lovely to get stuck into it. We will have to at some point down the line.
We'll flip it on another day.
Maybe we'll do that on the outside as we can get a bit more loosey goosey. But I got a format, damn it! I got a format that the people have come here to listen to.
Yes, sir.
So let's get stuck into the match. Let's talk about Proud and Powerful versus Best Friends. And as we always do, let's give the match its flowers. Uncle Dave, Big Puffer Dave, he gave it 5 of the big ones. It was the first match of the empty arena era to get 5 stars from Dave Meltzer. I know you don't come here for the Dave Meltzer love, but I always mention him because of who he is in the internet wrestling community. The hard markers at cage match. The hard markers at cage match. They currently rate it as a 9.01 by the time this goes to air, depending who's rated it. Maybe slightly below 8, maybe slightly higher. Who knows? And on the definitive AEW match guide, which doesn't change, we ranked it 7th when we tallied up the best matches from the first 2 years of AEW. So a match that's held in high esteem across many places and across many critics. And, of course, it came from something that I would say is less well-remembered and less positively remembered potentially, because the build-up for this match, it wasn't quite as positive, wasn't quite as well done as perhaps the match was. We're going to get into the build-up. These two started feuding when they went to Daly's place. They had a series of matches which sort of escalated. And then from that led to some beatdowns after the bell, which escalated to backstage brawls, which escalated into gears being put in people's showers, which escalated to gear being bleached, which escalated to Sue, Trent's mum's car getting destroyed. Ray, what did you think of the build up to this match?
You said it yourself. It wasn't great. And it kind of ran, forgive me if I got the timeline wrong, but it kind of ran on the periphery with Orange Cassidy and Jericho, am I right?
Yeah, it was all happening around about the same time.
But it I mean, all that other stuff is just standard TV stuff. But it got real when they went after Sue's car.
Yeah,
that's when it got like real to me, because Trent and his mama are close, and you could see that the best friends are they're, I guess, a group now, right? But particularly the tag team, they're not a comedy tag team, but they're always fun, happy going. They have comedy spots, but they're serious when they get in the ring. But that took this from them like just looking at the bright side and having fun to being really serious. And I think that was a much needed flip to get to where they wanted to go. Okay,
so you're saying that once that part happened, that's when you emotionally engaged with the story.
A little more, yeah. You kind of you can sink your teeth into it once. I mean, we've seen all these pranks and stuff happen, right? Didn't the Usos, right? Didn't the Usos make fun of Dax and Cash for shaving their backs?
Yeah,
like stupid stuff all the time.
Yeah.
But when it touches a family member and it's something you'd be like, oh, all right, they pissed now. Then you're like, okay, what's about to happen next? And that's when I think I really jumped into it.
See, look, for me personally, I did not emotionally engage with this storyline at all. Like one bit. Even when that stuff happened, it didn't engage. It was just, I don't know, it just felt like a feud that was going on and on and on. I think by the point that Trent's mum was involved, it had just become something that was, this is the Best Friends and Proud and Powerful segment again this week. So it was something that I was like mentally checking out for potentially, and so wasn't, engaged with it because it had just been, a really bog standard thing of like, oh, we're going to fight backstage this week. Oh, we're going to take someone hostage this week, or we're going to put someone's bags in the shower this week. Like, I don't know. It was week in, week out, just wasn't engaging me. And the matches I didn't think were anything to write home about either. So I don't know. For me, until this actual match happened, it was just not something that I was engaged with at the time. And which, you know, it was a funny time looking back on it. It was a time in the AEW's history where they were kind of spinning their wheels a little bit, because Double or Nothing had happened. They'd had the specials that they did after Double or Nothing. And they were I think they were spinning their wheels waiting for things to change with the COVID situation. There weren't any big specials on the horizon, TV specials on the horizon. So they were kind of just slowly moving through particularly in the mid card, just keeping things afloat while bigger things happened and the world could potentially open up more, or hopefully open up more, I guess. Maybe they thought it would happen sooner than it actually did. I'm not sure.
And give them their flowers. They did the absolute best they could in that pandemic era. But I think a lot of your issues maybe with the feud in general come down to card placement. And I don't mean like literally like on time, but where they are. Because Proud and Powerful, as good as they are, have never really been given like a spotlight. And the Best Friends have been secondary to Orange Cassidy almost from jump. And we look at Best Friends, and again, I don't want to call them a comedy team because they're not, but we look at them as that fun, happy-go-lucky team that has a fun match. We look at Proud and Powerful as, they're, I hate that Proud and Powerful because, they're from New York and they're tough street dudes, but they always have to be associated with like robbing somebody or jumping somebody from the back or stuff like that. So I feel like those two tropes maybe made people not look at it as serious as it was. And then when the match started, everybody was like, oh, okay, I get it now. So maybe that's what it was.
I think you're right that card placement probably had a large part to do with it, because this was at this point in the tag division. This was when Kenny and Hangman were the champions and leading into FTR becoming champions. So the focus in the tag division at the very top was very much like the Young Bucks, Kenny and Hangman, and FTR. And that was very obvious that those three were the three teams at the pinnacle of the division. So it was like the mid card of the tag division, which in AEW, I think they actually, one of the promises they have lived up to is making tag team wrestling like a main event feature and a big attraction of what they do. But even so, like the mid card of the tag team it's not something that that you're like waiting on the edge of your seat to see every week, I guess. And part of it, is, as I said, I didn't engage with the content. I do think getting Sue involved, and as we'll see in the match, it actually pays off incredibly. And it's become a feature of their act, which is beloved now. So, it was a great call to do that. And as you said, that was when you engaged. I'm sure there's other people out there who are the same as you. I'm just speaking from my perspective. And the actual match that we're talking about, that was set up when Proud and Powerful refused to apologize for destroying Sue's car. And that's when this backstage fight concept was put forward, and it was said this is what they were going to do. Before we get into the actual match itself, did you have anything else you wanted to say about the build?
No, you're spot on. Also, one thing we can say, as we'll see when we get into the match, is Sue is a superstar.
Yeah. And she knows how to work it, doesn't she? Like, she knows how to work a camera and pick her spots and pick her moments. Yeah.
It's amazing to me. When I first heard they were going to go to this gimmick or this form of match, I think most of us of a certain age immediately think back to Eddie and Cena. And I try really hard not to compare old matches to new matches because it'll never match up in my mind. And so if I'm honest with you, if I'm completely honest here, when I first watched this match, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like the greatest thing to me when I first watched it. It took a couple of rewatches to realize this match was amazing. And that's probably because I was still thinking of Eddie versus Cena. So I hope other people didn't have that same mental cloud that I had, because you're not giving a great match the chance it deserves.
Yeah. Look, not to skip to the final part of the podcast where we talk about the legacy and the impact, but I think the best matches do actually reward rewatching, like a true sign of greatness is when you rewatch it, like the match gets better. So yeah, let's get stuck into it and let's talk about the actual match when it happened. There was no promo for it, no video package summing up everything that had happened. I guess they just didn't need it because, as I said, it wasn't necessarily the best one, but it immediately made an impact. A cement area in a parking lot, cars sort of circled around. Commentators say it's pinfall, submission, or surrender only. Proud and Powerful come out with their Dead Kennedy's face paint on. I think this was this like the first time they'd worn it, or maybe the first time since their debut that they'd worn that face paint, which is just such a striking look.
They wore it in the debut, and I want to say they wore it on one of the Stadium Stampedes.
Yep.
But this was probably the first proper match on Dynamite that they wore it on.
Yeah.
And when they put that face paint on, it's over. Like, it's for real.
Yeah. Yeah, a really striking look, really cool look. And the best friends come out wearing jeans. I love it when people wear jeans to a street fight. It's just adds like just a little bit and just gives a fit, like makes that fight feel real. We talked about the Dead Kennedys makeup, but what did you think of just the general setup and the setting that they had for the fight?
It helps to own a football team with the stadium because it just works perfectly, right? It was in the perfect place. It had the perfect amount of people. Because, of course, I mean, you know, if you see two dudes fighting in a parking lot in real life, you're going to huddle around and watch. So it felt very real to that. And like you said, I hate street fights when the dude comes out in tights. What sense does that make? Like, I'm about to fight you. I'm not going to wrestle you. So it felt good to see them appropriately attired, if that's fair to say.
Yeah.
But no, I enjoyed it, and I also enjoyed the fact that when Dynamite came on from commercial, like they was just there. You know, I appreciated that because, like, ultimately, you know, you've seen some on other companies where like they have music and they walk out and just fight. This is a fight.
It didn't start in the arena or anything like that, and them saying it's a street fight. It was a parking lot fight, and. You know, I don't know the statistics, but I'm guessing that football parking lots is high on the level of, like, this is where fights go down.
There's quite a bit of inebriation on football parking lots. I'm going to say,
like, like pub, bar parking lots probably up there. Football parking lots would have to be pretty high.
Pretty high, sir, yes.
Yeah. Look, the two teams immediately start brawling. Ortiz rams Trent into a car, and JR, fantastic line to start things off. That won't be the last car that gets dented. And it's immediately just like chaos with guys going into walls, being thrown into car mirrors. Trent puts Ortiz in the motor part of the. I'm not a car person. I'm sorry. I'm gonna in the motor area, motor bay, and just slams the hood down on him. Chucky T and Trent then hit a senton off the car roof, squashing Ortiz. Like, there's just no way for that bump to just not completely suck.
That's the thing about it. Like, you know, you can make some bumps better. There's nothing of this 15 minutes could have been made better. Like, they just took it.
Yeah, it's cement, metal, glass. Like, this would have been one you'd wake up the next day hurting.
Man, there's a spot right after where I believe it's Trent. No, it's Ortiz, I think, that catapults Trent, or maybe I got it flipped. Where you know how you do the little catapult and they flip to the corner. He does that underneath the truck, the bed of the truck. Like, that made me audibly say, "Oh my god!"
Yep, because. Yeah, this is a thing with sharp edges potentially. And one of the things I wanted to bring up early on, I think it's worth talking about the extras that they had around. They aren't just cheering and they're shouting one-liners. Brandon Cutler, I think, is the MVP, the unheralded MVP for this one. He's just yelling quite a bit. And when they get out the plywood, he's going, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. How much do you just love the extras in this match?
They give it the background it needed.
Yeah.
So again, good wrestling makes you kind of revert to other things in your life, right? Or good entertainment, rather, I should say. This really felt, what suspension of disbelief is the word we use, the term. This really felt like, man, if these dudes wasn't working right now, they would be fighting. It felt like a real fight in a real parking lot. And that authenticity I think is what lent itself to the match and made it better.
Yeah, and I think like adding to that authentic feel is just how chaotic it is. Like there's a bit where Trent like throws a 2x4 at Ortiz and it bounced back and like hits him in the face. Just like
it cut him. He was cut over the eye. Yeah.
And like Santana pulls a tire iron out from a mud flap. Later on, Ortiz gets a shovel from the back of the ute. I love how organic it feels. Like they're using weapons that suit the arena that they're fighting in, which is, they're not pulling out chairs and stuff. I really like that.
Yep. And man, when Ortiz threw the sledgehammer at Chucky, I gasped. Like,
yeah,
it's hard to get this old contrarian, if you want to still call me that, to like really be like, oh my God, like really get into it. And this match had me concerned for these guys' safety.
Yeah. Yeah, like so Santana gets busted open. Like, what a cool look. The dead Kennedys makeup, the black, the white, and the red. It's just like such an iconic, cool look. And as you said, like Ortiz throws a sledgehammer and Chuck dodges it, like last second stuff. If he didn't dodge, it's hitting him square in the forehead. And it goes
it's a real sledgehammer.
Oh yeah, it goes like bang into the window shield. That's like a real sledgehammer into a real car window shield. Yeah, Chuck and Ortiz then like brawl on top of the car. Ortiz suplexes Chuck onto the roof, landing like on the glass window. And it's just like the way that it breaks. This is like isn't sugar glass.
No. He even turns over and you could see the glass in his back.
Yeah. It's not like the sort of easy break glass that wrestling companies will use sometimes, which I mean, I've never taken a bump onto it or touched it. I'm sure it still sucks, but like real glass, it takes a lot to break a real plane of glass and it cuts like hard. Yeah. And there's just like this brilliant image of Santana with the dead president makeup with like blood just dripping down his face from his forehead. I just cannot speak more highly of the atmosphere and the aesthetics of this match.
Yep. These are the types of matches that make you appreciate what these guys put on the line for us. Because this was, by and large, it wasn't a random match in Dynamite, but in the grand scheme of things, it's just a random match in another episode. And they gave their all. They put their bodies on the line for this, and that spot is one of those that you think of where you're like, you don't feel that in the morning.
Yeah, Excalibur makes a great point in commentary. He actually brings up what we've kind of been talking about. He brings up the point that the angles that they're hitting things at are not normal for wrestling, which I thought was really interesting because like we watch wrestling obviously, and within the like the kayfabe, the suspension of disbelief aspect of it, like we know these people trained to give moves, but also trained to take them in a way that like minimizes their impact potentially, or like mitigates the impact somewhat. But it's like a really great moment to bring that up because he's like, these guys, you can't train to hit the angles that these guys are hitting right now. So it's like an added level of brutality for it. So yeah, really great call by Excalibur. And I mentioned JR earlier as well. Like the commentators are really hitting well in this match.
They run their job.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's just, as we've said, really heavy shots back and forth by both teams. It's a seesawing sort of style of match through guardrails, using weapons, breaking sticks of wood.
The shovel, the what was it? The snow shovel that they hit. They hit best friends on the back with it, and you can see it crumple up. Just
Yeah, I think I'm happy to say though that Trent takes like the worst bump of the night, and it sort of is a bit of an escalation point for the match. Like when it's heading to the end of the match is when Trent gets powerbombed on the roof of the car, which makes a huge dent, and then slammed into the windscreen. Like we talked about the glass, how gross it is. And by that point, he doesn't even have a shirt, so the shards are sticking out. It's just tearing up his back, and he like slides down a little bit as well. Is that one of the worst bumps you've ever seen, Ray? Like just from a gruesome kind of gross perspective?
Yeah, just, if we're not talking like throwing somebody off a scaffold or something, just a regular bump, that's one of the hardest you could take.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Oh, and glass spots always make me cringe. So to take the power bomb and then go through the windshield oh man.
Yep. And at this point, like Santana and Ortiz, they kind of, it's like they look at each other, really cool facial expressions, you know, with the makeup we've talked about, with the blood, and they look at each other like this needs to end here. And I think it's underrated how much they radiate tough guy energy, because like we watch wrestling, right? And we know that everyone in it is tough. Anyone who wrestles has an insane pain who wrestles at that level has an insane pain threshold, could probably beat the absolute crap out of you or I and most people that are watching. Like that's just a fact. But there's some performers that just have an energy to them that makes that feel even more authentic. Like, you know, I think the ultimate example is Eddie Kingston, right? But 100%. You know, Santana Ortiz, they're like a smidge behind him.
You know, it's got to be the New Yorkness of them.
Yep.
It's got to be because both of them were very open about being from New York. They exude it in the way they walk, the way they talk, the way they dress, the way they wrestle. And even if there's one thing you know about New York, and you're from Australia, I don't know if you've ever been to New York.
I have,
Oh, nice. Okay. The one thing you know about New York, if you've never been there, is it's pretty tough if you live there.
Yep.
So
it's an intense atmosphere. Like there's a tense atmosphere. So I live in a town that's like north of Sydney. It's about 2 hours north of Sydney, and it's got about 1 million people in it. But it feels like it's got a really laid back, almost a country vibe to it. But when you go to Sydney, and you can feel everyone there is like slightly tense. And just the energy in the air is different. And I loved going to New York, right? Like I had a fun time there. But you can tell like the energy in the air is just thick with that atmosphere. And if like I was there for a good time, so like I'm on holidays, I'm spending money, I've saved up for it. But like if you're in that atmosphere and you didn't have much money and you had a crappy job that you didn't necessarily like, and you know you maybe had family problems at home, it would be a really shitty place, and it would breed like just really tough people, people with like a lot of scar tissue.
100%. And the crazy thing about New York is it's the biggest city in the country by far, like 10, 12 million people or something crazy like that. But it's not big in terms of wide. So they just keep piling on top of each other, on top of each other, on top of each other. So just imagine if you're in an elevator with too many people and how that makes you feel. That's them every day. So yeah, I get that attitude that comes from them. And those New York wrestlers tend to be able to use that to their advantage in situations like this. Yeah. And that tough guy energy you said with Proud and Powerful, it's not fake. Yeah. It is all authentic.
Yeah, and it's in, as you said, like it's in all those small things you said before, like the way they walk, the way they talk, the way they look at each other. And
the right detail can bump your wardrobe up a notch. Kick off this year by letting Indochino upgrade your style with customized suits, shirts, chinos, bomber jackets, and more without spending a fortune. Indochino clothing is made to your exact measurements, and you can customize every detail. Give yourself a style edit that sets the tone for the rest of the year with Indochino. Get $50 off any purchase of $3.99 or more with promo code STYLE at Indochino.com. That's Indochino.com, promo code STYLE.
Like even just there's this bit just after they put Trent through the glass where one of them's got like a lead pipe and he goes, "This is the biggest mistake of your life," and he's just like tapping the lead pipe like and it's just like you can just imagine like these two people in a dark alley and just like this guy with the lead pipes just like just to menace, like in a menacing way. Oh man, like terrifying stuff. Yeah. But all hope is not lost because Orange Cassidy, he emerges from the back of a car just in his classic laconic way. Apparently, I don't know, like he's been resting in the back of a car, sleeping in the boot or something.
Just chilling back there. Just happened to be there.
And hits an orange punch with a steel chain to knock out Santana, delivering him to Chucky, who hits a tombstone on the car bonnet. And over on the ute next to him, Chucky T hits the bastard driver through some plywood that's been like stretched out across the back of the ute. Sorry, truck. We call trucks utes here in Australia.
It'll work. It's okay.
Yeah, and gets the 3 count. Couple things I wanted to touch on. Firstly, I did a number of weeks ago. I did the Pac versus Orange Cassidy match, and I said I think Orange Cassidy has the best Superman punch in wrestling. You're a big Roman Reigns fan, Ray.
It's better.
Look, it is
better.
Yes,
it's better. And I am one of the biggest Roman Reigns fans walking New York. It is better because Roman Reigns is 6'2", 265 pounds, and Orange Cassidy is about the size of my leg.
He's a whippet.
And he comes out, and the best part about it is the slop style and all that. He lays that shit in. That is not a put on. He lays that punch in.
Yeah. Well, that's his thing, right? He uses the sloth style to lull his opponent into a false sense of security and then hits hard and fast. So his moves just have to have impact.
Can I tell you something? You're the first person that brought that to my attention that makes sense in my mind. I was the biggest Orange Cassidy hater. I think we talked about this.
Yeah.
If it wasn't you, it was somebody else. I get that he's funny to people and the spots can be funny at times, but I just hated it because I just felt like you're killing the point of the wrestling match. But when you pointed out to me, it's all a put on to lull them into a false sense of security. Then I was like, oh my God. Yeah. It makes so much sense.
Look, to be fair to you, I don't think it is always done quite that well, but that's the idea, right? And in some matches, like the Pac versus Orange Cassidy match that we talked about, it's perfect. It's done so well. But there's somewhere, there was I think the ladder match at the Double or Nothing maybe that year. Oh, no, not Double or Nothing, All Out. He comes out and he stands on the ladder and tries to reach up. And it's funny, but come on, he's actually meant to be smart. That's part of the thing, is that he's actually really smart, and that's how he gets. So yeah, I guess maybe you could chalk that up to playing the crowd. But yeah, fantastic cameo in this match, just emerging from a boot and hitting, a chain wrapped orange punch. Great stuff. And then, really, really good looking finish to it. A brutal finish to a brutal match. What an ending. What did you think of the ending?
The ending was perfect, I think, because Orange Cassidy was a part of this feud from the jump. So it felt kind of perfectly climactic for him to play a part and finishing it. And what is Trent called him now? I remember it being called the Dude Buster. It's called the Bastard Driver.
That's just what I know it as. That's what they do it. That's what it's called when Kota Ibushi does it. So that's that, and he was the first person I saw do it. Okay. And Kevin Kelly called it a Bastard Driver. So that's just what I've always called it. It might be something else.
When he was in WWE, it was called the Dude Buster because they were the Dude Busters. Him and Caden Croft or whatever the guy's name was. Whatever it is, I love the move. I think it's fantastic. But to go through the plywood onto the bed of the truck, and then pile drivers are banned for a reason. So to hit that pile driver on top of the hood of the car, and the thing about matches like these is, unfortunately, the violence has to escalate, and you can't finish the match with a roll up. The last spot has to be the most.
Not this match.
No. So I think both of those spots were safe enough, yet vicious enough that I think all of us were like, "Yep, that's the one."
Yep. And then, of course, just to add the cherry on the cake, just the perfect post match, right? So end of the match, we just hear honking. And the best friends stumble over and the camera just follows them so perfectly. It reveals Sue in a new van. The Proud and Powerful destroyed her old one, but she's got a new one now. Comes up, hugs a bloodied up glass infused Trent. OC jumps in the front. He's riding shotgun. Chucky T and Trent in the back, riding off into the night, only stopping for Sue to put a hand out and flip the bird to the camera. One of the great endings to a wrestling show in the history of wrestling, right? Her giving the finger as they drive off into the night. Perfect. Is this the most wholesome middle finger that's ever been given?
Gotta be. It's gotta be. It's gotta be. It's just one of it's one of those. It's one of those middle fingers that just makes you say, "Aw."
Yeah, just such a brilliant ending. Ray, this match is 10 minutes. How wild is that?
That's the best part of the match. It is so compact, and it's so. I know that these epics we've seen over the years are 20, 30 minutes, and they're great. But it's something to see a match that's this good, that is so digestible. It's so easily digestible that you can watch it in one sitting and keep it moving, and then it's good. And I think that helps the fact that that why it's so good.
One of the things I'm curious to ask you is like what extras you picked up on a rewatch. Because for me, like obviously I was blown away by the action. I think everyone was at first. But the things that I picked up on my rewatch was how great the character performances as well were from both performers. We already talked a lot about Santana and Ortiz and like the energy that they have. But there's just like some really small stuff that the best friends do as well. Like Chucky T gives this it's really subtle, but it's like this relieved smile when he notices Sue in the car. It's like when he hears the honking, it's like, oh, fuck, is this Jericho, Hager, and Sammy? Like, are we just about to get beaten up again? But no, it's Sue, and he's just got, it's not overdone, but it's the kind of smile you'd have like after you've been in a fight like that and you've just got on a 10-minute sprint, you've emptied the tank, and you're like, oh, thank goodness. It's just like such a wholesome moment, but just so subtle as well. What did you pick up on the rewatch? Because you mentioned that like your opinion of this improved a lot on rewatch.
The two things that caught me the most, we've talked about it a bit. One of them was the crowd. I didn't pay attention to the crowd the first time. They were just periphery to me. And then to see the reactions and how their reactions helped the performers and things like that, that really like improved. Because we all know a great crowd can make a great match epic, or a bad crowd can make a great match mediocre. Well, this crowd helped the match. That was the first thing. And I say crowd, the 20 people.
The extras. Yeah.
The extras. And the second thing was, you pointed out perfectly, was the facial expressions and kind of the expressions between each other between spots. The one with Ortiz when he grabbed, or I believe it was Santana. No, it was one of them. I can't remember which one it was. But when he grabbed the pipe and was kind of tap, 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 and he was like, oh, you gonna get it now. And he had that face that almost was Joker-esque. Like, I got you. Yeah. I didn't notice that at first because I was just looking at the spot. And then you see the motivation behind the spot. And I had time to think about it. I really feel like, in kayfabe, of course, that before the match started, that these dudes came and placed these spots here, the tire iron and the lead pipe. Like, I'm gonna need that in this fight.
Yep.
And so when he pulls it out and you see that look on his face, it's almost like, yeah, I planned for this. Now you got to see me. And that just adds it to me. And I know that's all in my mind, but that just makes it that much greater to me.
No, I like it because it's a different setting, right? So like, someone's pulled up the cars and stuff, and there's probably been like a lull before everyone turns up, and maybe Santana Ortiz just went in and like laid some traps. And
but to me, it's no different than when there's like a death match. And they have the tacks that they've put and they've hit under the ring.
Yep.
It's the same thought process, right? You're prepared.
Yeah, I'm gonna need that. Yeah. No, I like that. I think that's a cool aspect to think about as well. Like to sort of think about what we don't see, I guess, in the lead up to these sorts of things. Now, I know you don't love Meltzer, but this was the first empty arena match that Meltzer gave 5 stars. And as I said, this is like a really beloved match and a really well thought of match. What do you think sets this apart from the empty arena matches that came beforehand that like just had this one sticking above?
Surprise. I don't think anybody expected it to be that good.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest.
Yeah. I agree because like as I said, like the build up to it was pretty mid to use a term that's pretty fitting of it. It was not something that people had a lot of, or at least myself had a lot of emotional investment into. But
Dave has a history of giving matches higher grades when they surprise him. So I like this. I think this match just surprised him and a lot of people with how good it was.
Yeah. I think as another factor that could have been into it is just like the different setting, because by this point we're all pretty sick of, even though like I think AEW did what they could. All the companies did what they could, and I think it was a masterstroke for AEW to use the extras the way they did, and of course everyone copied them. So it became it obviously worked because everyone copied it. And then of course the WWE moved to the Thunderdome, which was like ultimately their bigger response to not being able to have crowds. But even with those things in place, it wasn't the same. And I think we all got a little bit sick of seeing it, even subconsciously potentially. And you could tell that by when actual crowds came back, it felt like biblical. Like that Double or Nothing 2021 and WrestleMania, the two nights, they felt just incredible and so elevated because of the crowds. And that's how you could tell, like, even if we were still enjoying it, there was a subconscious part of it that there was something missing that we weren't necessarily putting together. Even in an era with a full crowd, this match probably would have been done exactly the same.
Yeah.
Like if it was backstage like this, and it was different as well. Like this is in a parking lot. It's not in front of a bunch of empty seats. It's not in a wrestling ring even. And I think that helped it stick above, say, like, you know, there was a really good match between Ishii and Hiromu Takahashi that I remember well. John Moxley versus Brody Lee is one of my favorite matches of all time. We talked about that a few weeks ago. Even those matches, they have that element to them where you're like, but this has like the perfect setting for it, and they didn't need a crowd, and it worked perfectly.
That's a great point that I didn't think of until you mentioned it. But it reminds me of the first two Roman Reigns versus Jey Uso matches that wouldn't have worked if there was a crowd because you needed to hear what they were saying.
Yeah.
And so I think this match was enhanced because you could hear everything.
Yeah.
And if you would have heard the crowd, it would have maybe changed the atmosphere, but it feels so much more real because it's dead silent. And you hear flesh hitting flesh and flesh hitting glass and things like that, which made it feel more real. And I think that's the one thing I could think of this parking lot brawl, parking lot fight, is it just felt real.
And that will always help a match. Like if it just has such a haze of authenticity to it, that will always help something feel good. Moving beyond the actual match itself, because we've just lathered praise liberally everywhere about this match, I wanted to talk about the lasting impact of the match for both teams, because I think that's somewhere this match doesn't necessarily stand up, where it maybe falls down. What do you think the lasting legacy of this match is for both teams?
Well, this is, I think, definitely the best match both have had in AEW, which I think is in both parts really, really cool and really, really bad, because both of these teams, all four of these performers, are so good that they could be having top level matches every week. I give Best Friends a break because Trent got hurt. And he, as of this recording, he just came back. So that will hopefully help them in going further. But there's no excuse that Proud and Powerful hasn't been a top level tag team. There's no excuse. And so that this is their legacy is really cool, that a random mid-card match in the pandemic era holds up. On rewatching is great. But I think it's also a shame that this is going to be the best match you remember them in as a tag team. They've done great things as a group. I think the Stadium Stampedes have been fun and stuff like that. But I'm talking about as just a singular tag team match. This should not be what you remember them for. But yet I think it will be.
This match added a lot to the mythology of both teams. Like the sort of the legend that they have in AEW, particularly like the Dead Kennedys makeup, like that. I think it, like, as you said, like when they wear that means stuff's about to happen. And I think this match does. I'm not sure. I didn't watch a lot of LAX before they were Proud and Powerful in AEW. I'm not sure if they did it regularly before then, but like for me now, because they wore the Dead Kennedys makeup in this match, like it means when they wear it in the future. So like when they bring it out for Blood and Guts, it's serious. It's about to go down. And of course, like it adds to the toughness for Best Friends to be like, these guys, they're lovable, they're wholesome, but they've got a lot of grit to them as well. But I don't think it elevated them. Like I don't think either of the teams were elevated in the ranks of AEW because of this match. straight after it as well, like best friends got stuck in what I would call pretty much the same feud, where it's like another feud that goes on forever, probably too long. Every week there's another segment where something wacky or crazy or trying to build heat happens. This is, of course, talking about against Miro and Kip Sabian. And it leads to like a fantastic match. Like there's a fantastic blow-off match, but it just goes on for too long and the emotional stakes just aren't there. I feel like for most people that was the case, particularly with that second feud, if not this first one as well. And I don't think that's like a template that's a good one to have for a long-term thing, like, oh, well, these guys are really good at saving it when the match happens.
I agree, and there's a positive and a negative to kind of the stable wars of AEW, but best friends being kind of like the wacky home for like all the people who don't fit is fun and endearing, but it doesn't help them in the long run when you get into feuds like this. And maybe you'll disagree with this, but Miro and Kip Sabian was not a good combo. So I just don't think that was a good match to begin with.
Yeah.
Kip Sabian is a fantastic wrestler, and him and Penelope are a great combo. But I didn't need to see Kip and Miro being a video game guy. So I just think there was so much working against that next feud that it just wasn't going to work in general. And then it lasted too long to begin with.
Yeah. I think, like, looking at this, there's almost an argument against the long-term planned out nature that AEW has. Because, like, AEW, they're a company that, for better or worse, and I think for most of this, like, mostly better, because I'm a big proponent of this, like, they have these long stories that they plan out, and they book very methodically for that. And the tag team division at this point, like, the story was Hangman and Kenny, the Bucks, and FTR. And there really wasn't room for one of these teams to come out of this match, you know, red hot and on fire and stuff up that situation. There's an alternate universe where, like, I think Proud and Powerful win and go up against the Bucks, and they come out of this just so flaming red hot, and they go against the Bucks and completely blow apart that upper tier of the tag team division. But that wasn't going to happen in AEW because of the methodical nature of the story that they'd planned out, which, you know, for the most part, like, I love the fact that they build out these stories and map them out and execute them so that stories have a logical beginning, middle and end. But I guess this here, what we're talking about is possibly the argument against that.
Great question. Great point. I have two quick retorts to that. The first one is that is the one negative about ultra long-term storytelling, because the middle always is going to be your problem. You're going to have a beginning and have an end. And your middle is always, and AEW's been, I don't want to call them lucky because they very clearly planned for this, but in terms of, like, the reactions have gotten so lucky that people haven't gotten tired of the wait in between the beginning and the end. And they've done great in booking so far, but this is the problem with long-term storytelling, because you got to get through that middle part, right?
Just to quickly jump in, my I guess my talk to that would be that they have built enough engagement with their fans that their fans will trust them and they'll go along with it knowing that it's going somewhere.
Absolutely. And that is their greatest asset, is that they have the goodwill to get that time. The second quick point is that's the beauty of the mid-card, right? I know that there's parts of the mid-card that's supposed to build you up to the next part, but there's that whole other 75 to 80% of the mid-card that exists just because it exists, right? Just to get you from match to match, show to show, card to card, pay-per-view to pay-per-view. And this is the quintessential gotta have something to do match. And it just outshined every expectation anybody had for it.
It did main event Dynamite that week, I guess, but I know what you're saying. It was not like a program that was a headline feud, so to speak. But it's good. I guess it's probably a good thing that AEW, it shows that AEW are willing to go with, like, what's most important at the, you know, in the main event spot, not always having the same wrestler in it, but at the same time, I think you're right with what you said. Yeah.
Diversity doesn't just mean sexual orientation or racial or gender. Diversity just means different. And this brings diversity to the card.
Yep. I've got two more questions. One quick one, which I'll leave till last, and just one that's like a more of a broad overview. AEW's done, like, a lot of really violent matches. I'm thinking, you know, the the first one that comes to mind, Escalera de la Muerte. And then, of course, the Full Gear, the Lights Out, the Unsanctioned match. And there's also, I think Kenny and Mox both had ones against Joey Janela as well, which were quite good. And then there's the Blood and Guts match. This match, of course. The Steel Cage match that the Bucks and Lucha Bros had. Yeah. Also, like Jericho and Gage, like him carving a chunk out of him. Where do you think this ranks in terms of, of course, one that I must mention, Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa, their Lights Out Unsanctioned match. Where do you think this ranks in terms of the real ultra-violent stuff that AEW has done?
Well, I think when I think ultra-violent, I think light tubes and glass and the barbed wire web that Moxley and Kenny went through. Yeah. Like that. So I wouldn't call
the exploding barbed wire match that they had. Oh, God, those two are nuts.
I forgot about that. That's another one. So they've really taken some chances, right? They've really taken some chances with the ultra violence. I wouldn't call this match ultra violent. I would call it maybe one of the most violent regular matches they could have had. But I think when I think ultra violent, I think we need to make sure we have paramedics nearby just in case. Yeah, and that's what I think of when I think of Gage and Jericho. What I think of when I saw Moxley versus Kenny both times in both of their hardcore matches. What I think of when you saw Britt versus Rosa, stuff like that.
Yeah, by ultra violent, I think I more mean like it's something that they're able to do because of they're not rated PG, right? Like they aim at an older audience, whereas the WWE aims sort of more broad audience, including children. So they can do an elevated level of violence. I think this match would fall into that category. And I'm just trying to categorize it amongst all of those. Because for me, I think it's right up there, right? But the Britt and Thunder Rosa match, I think, is probably like a hair ahead because of just the fact that they had women do this insanity and the passion and fire and grit that those guys showed and the character performances in that match was incredible. The match I talked about last week, and we mentioned Moxley versus Omega, the exploding barbed wire death match. I love that match. I think that's brilliant, and that's a hill I'll die on. I won't relitigate it because I just spent an hour and a half talking about it last week.
It's a great match. It's a great match for 99% of it.
Yeah, and I love that cage match as well that the Lucha Bros and Young Bucks had. But apart from those three, like this one probably is like slotting right in there, which is really like that's high praise. That's a pretty high air.
Yeah, I would agree. It definitely fits.
My last question. This one's a question without notice, and we've spent an hour talking about it. Obviously, both of us think it's a great match. My last question though is: we both know that TK's money runs deep, but how much do you think all the damage to these cars costed him?
Oh my God. 50 to 75K, maybe 100.
So, that's pocket money for him. Like that's nothing.
Oh yeah. No, that's lunch. That's lunch money.
Anyway, Ray, look, I've really appreciated having you on here. It's been a blast. This is a fantastic match to talk about, and I've really enjoyed rewatching it and chatting to you about it. Do you have anything more to add? And if not, just tell the people where they can find you.
I just want to say first and foremost that you and I have been going back and forth. We've been in each other's periphery for years, back to Lords of Pain or Wrestling Headlines. Just a pleasure.
Yeah, you're one of the first people to comment on my columns there, actually. I really appreciated it. So, I wouldn't be here without you, probably.
You were a really good writer, and you're an excellent podcaster, and it's been my pleasure. And it's been my pleasure to have our run-ins and our back and forths and our DMs and whatnot. I enjoy our conversation. And I thank you for thinking of me for this, because you didn't have to. And I truly appreciate that. I appreciate you giving me a chance to show the world that I actually do care about AEW. Y'all see me criticizing for other things, but I care about this company. So thank you for that. But you can find me on Twitter at It's Rey Cash. That is REY as in Mysterio and CASH as in dollars. And anywhere on the Chairshot.com, the Chairshot Radio Network. I'm all over that thing. I write columns. I do podcasts. I do everything. I'll come to your house and wash your windows if you pay me. Whatever you need.
I've got nothing to say after that, Ray. Except that, look, as I said, thank you. Thank you for joining me. Been an absolute blast. And I really appreciate you jumping on, making the time of day for me. And look, I appreciate the listeners as well. Everyone listening out there, really appreciate it. It's been so fun. It's so fun making this podcast, and it's been a really great journey to see how it's growing and changing and how people are loving it and engaging with it. So I really appreciate it. If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter, Sir_Samuel. As I said at the start, make sure you listen to all of the other great shows on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. And make sure you listen in next week where I am talking about Cody versus MJF with Howard Schilling. So that will be a really fun one to talk about. So make sure you join me next Friday on the AEW Match Guide podcast. Thank you, Rey Cash, for joining me today. And thank you to the dear listeners out there for listening in. I'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to the AEW Match Guide podcast. If you enjoyed the show, then you can subscribe on the podcast app of your choice so you never miss an episode. Also, feel free to let me know on Twitter at Sir_Samuel. I'd love to hear from you. The AEW Match Guide podcast is brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network, where you can find many other fantastic podcasts discussing not just AEW, but all parts of the world of professional wrestling. Looking forward to seeing you again next week. I'm Sam Brown.
The right detail can bump your wardrobe up a notch. Kick off this year by letting Indochino upgrade your style with customized suits, shirts, chinos, bomber jackets, and more without spending a fortune. Indochino clothing is made to your exact measurements, and you can customize every detail. Give yourself a style edit that sets the tone for the rest of the year with Indochino. Get $50 off any purchase of $3.99 or more with promo code STYLE at Indochino.com. That's Indochino.com, promo code STYLE.